Hi, it's Jeff Chalmers here from discoverdouble-bass.com, and I'm at the Barbican Centre in London, joined by the wonderful Larry Grenadier of the Brad Meldau Trio. And in fact, we might be able to hear Brad's drummer, Jeff Ballard, in the background. He's doing a little bit of a sound check, so we might be able to hear some stuff. So Larry, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
And it's cool to see your bass. I was wondering what you'd be travelling with for this evening's concert.
Yeah.
And do you always play the same bass when you play live, or does it depend on how far you're travelling and if it's overseas?
I try to always bring a bass that I have. I have 3 basses right now. I try to bring, this is a Chinese bass, an Eastman.
Yes.
That the neck is detachable, it goes in a smaller case. So this is the bass I really travel with if I do bring the bass, which I try to always make it happen if I can. It's just nice to have your instrument set up the way you want, and consistent sound, and be able to practice during the day if I want to.
So before we talk a little bit about the different basses, you play through, you're really renowned for the German bass that you've owned since the early 90s, I think?
I bought it in 1994.
And where did you get that bass
in San
from?
Francisco.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's a cool instrument.
It's a really, it's, I don't really know much about it. It's just one of those basses that sounds good, and it's pretty, and it's...
Yeah.
It's like a big 3/4, it's kind of, but it's not a high-shouldered bass. It's easy to play. String length is not particularly long. I only, before that I had one bass that I bought in 1984. To the day, I found out later that I bought the German bass to the day 10 years from the same guy. And it was just by chance. I was just visiting San Francisco and bought this. So. I haven't had that many instruments, and then a few years ago I bought this because I wanted to have a bass that I could travel with. And then a few years, maybe around the same time, I bought a bass from Ben Puglisi in Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah.
So I have 3 basses, so I'm kind of...
How do you find switching between them? Is it something that, just get on with it and play?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you get to know them, and they all have different personalities and different attributes, and I kind of liked switching around. If I'm home practicing, it's kind of fun to jump around because they all inspire me in different ways. They're kind of all set up a little differently string-wise.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's kind of it's a luxurious thing actually.
Yeah.
I don't really just sit on one bass. I'll move around.
It's a nice thing. It's a nice thing to have. Hey, I was thinking, your German bass. It doesn't have an extension, but I think you're one from the beautiful bass that you play by Ben Puglisi. It does, doesn't it? How have you found?
Yeah, it did. Well, it did. It did for a moment. It kind of broke.
I was going to say, how did you find playing with an extension? And is that something?
Great. I loved it. I never had played really. I never had a bass with an extension.
Sure.
It's great. I mean, I'm missing it now.
I've got a removable extension on my bass,
really?
But the reality is I hardly ever put it back on.
Okay.
Because I sort of take it off, and it's the nut is cut just a little bit on the E string side, so you can kind of knock the corner of the nut off, and then basically screw on the extension. It's a beautiful thing made by a luthier in the UK called Martin Bailey. So I'll provide a link to
Fantastic.
that. And I found that I was playing more classical stuff at the time, and I found that it was just really a fun thing. But in the end, I liked. When I went back to playing jazz, I found that I liked the simplicity of for me, I don't know, it just went there. But I wondered whether it was something you'd thought about exploring more.
A little bit. I would find myself tuning down the E string, for certain moments in the night, and but then you have to readjust your thinking about how you're fingering everything else. With an extension, you don't have to do that, and it's really nice. And I think if the bass can take it, why not? It's just, all electric bass players are kind of dealing with that low end now. Yeah. So I enjoy it.
It must be a cool thing to throw in a band, especially with, playing with the Brad Meldau Trio for 25 years. You suddenly throw down one of those low Cs, they're going to know. Like, what's he
where's that coming from? Right? It's really fun, so I appreciate that. And then obviously like just exploring different tunings in general has been really opening up the different vibrations coming from the instrument and my reaction to those vibrations.
So you've got the German bass, we have the beautiful bass by Ben Puglisi. Did you play that at the ISB recital?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
think
played.
you did.
I brought both. I brought
Oh,
that
really?
and the German bass.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
I was kind of going back and forth. Yeah.
Oh wow! I guess
Yeah.
if you're playing at a convention full of bass players, you're going to want to feel comfortable. But
Yeah, I was able to. I think because it was in Rochester or
yes,
somewhere. Yeah, right.
Yeah, well,
Or
no,
Ithaca.
it wasn't Ithaca, New York.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
just drove. Yeah.
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
I loved it. Okay, and this place, where did you get this Eastman from? What's
This
the-
I got from a luthier who used to be in New York, but now has moved out of town. His name is Arnold Schnitzer.
Now, one of the all-time favorite basses that I played is his ergonomic bass, which I
Yeah.
actually played, I think, possibly at that convention.
Fantastic.
And there was something about the way that the mid-range, the way that it just, I
Yeah.
loved it. So
Yeah, he's an
very
artist.
gifted
Yeah.
guy.
And so he had this bass. I went to a shop looking for basses for this reason, for something I could travel with.
Okay.
Didn't find anything that day, and he called me a few weeks later and said, "I think I have what you're looking for." And I
Yeah.
came, and it's like, because these are factory hybrid basses.
So this
But-
is a hybrid instrument.
Yeah, so the top is spruce, but everything else is
Yeah.
pressed wood. And even though they're factory like that, they all sound different. So you kind of have to just try a bunch and see which ones come close to your idea of what sounds good.
So you're taking the neck on and off when you fly, and then
Yes, and
Yeah.
just reattach it and set the bridge up. Takes me under 5 minutes now.
Oh, wow.
Sped up the process.
so you can get that hotel room practice, and yeah.
And let the bass kind of relax with the tension on, so by the nighttime it stays pretty much in tune.
Yeah. Well, I've seen you play with this instrument a few years ago in Leeds when you were there with Brad Meldau Trio, and it was, the sound was absolutely wonderful, and it's beautiful. I mean, tell us about the strings. Bass players love to talk about strings.
Right.
I do.
I love to talk about strings too, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing today, and then you've asked me in a couple of weeks, it'd probably be different. I really change strings a lot. I change, types of strings.
Okay, so you've got spiracores on the bottom.
Yes.
There's Vike, I think.
Yes.
And then an olive G.
Yes.
So it's a beautiful combo. And what about the helicore? I associate that.
I use those.
you know-
I still use those too. I like
Yeah.
those strings too. You put them on, they sound great right away.
Yeah.
They sound good with the bow. I mean, they're very versatile strings. I mean, these are the original strings that I had as a kid. I
Yeah.
mean, like these particular ones.
Those
And
actual.
I was just going through my attic and checking out all the strings I had, and I said, "Oh, I'm gonna try these."
Have you got a big string? I have a string drawer.
Right.
That kind of pulls out. And
Yeah, mine's more than a drawer.
I was going to say it wasn't an attic.
And there's something about these strings that they're inspiring for the moment, and maybe in a couple of weeks
You'll be hearing it in a different way.
lose the interest.
The setup's fairly moderate. It looks like there's nothing extreme in there.
No, I mean,
yeah.
this idea
Comfortable.
of having high action, I quickly learned that that's not where it's at for
Yeah.
me. You want to have it high enough so you're not falling off the string, of course, but the sound is not, because, when it's too high, the tension can be too high depending on the string type.
Yeah.
And it just kind of chokes the note to me. So actually, you're not getting the full response of the instrument that way, and you're obviously working too hard.
So I see there's a pickup on there.
Yeah.
Do you play much using the pickup?
It depends on the musical environment that I'm
Yeah.
in. With Brad, I use a mic, but I use a mic kind of like a pickup in the sense that I put it's not on now, but I use a Sheps mic, and I put it pretty much like where the sound post is.
Yeah.
And then I put it through a mic preamp,
Yeah.
a Felix digital, it's Grace Design.
Grace. Yeah.
And then that goes into a powered monitor, which I have up high behind me.
Well-
So it's kind of like a little private PA.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
nice having I've never played that way, to be honest with you, but having it behind you must be.
I always
must be a
recommend
cool
bass
thing.
players check it out at least, because
Yeah.
it's a really different thing. And kind of Ron Carter hit me to that, because he had been doing that with pickups and amplifiers for a while, and you hear it obviously very directly and quickly, and down when most people have their amps at their ankles,
Yeah.
it's kind of going
and it
in
can
the wrong.
fire out into the audience, and
Yeah.
then the bass player's not really getting the information.
And it gives you a certain low end, which is nice,
Yeah.
but the clarity can be not as good. So I've really appreciated it. And I have kind of complete control of my sound on stage. I'm not
Yeah.
looking to the monitor guy or to the front of house to get what I need. If I need to EQ it or volume-wise, I can just boop. do
Yeah.
it. So it's really been nice.
And what about in the studio? So sorry, tell me the name of the mic you're using as a
It's a Sheps.
Sheps.
Yeah, it's I think it's called the CM6. I don't know, but it's the hypercardioid version of that mic, so it's the tightest pattern.
Would you use that in the studio?
I could. I typically don't. I usually kind of
leave that to the...
I usually leave that to the engineer, and they have whatever, there's a lot of mics. A lot of times I'm recording in the same studios in New York, so I know certain mics in certain studios that I really love that I've used over the years. So I kind of trust the engineer to do their thing unless it does not working for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then with you mentioned, we were chatting previously about working with the bow. When you're practicing arco, do you have are you using the same strings? Are you switching between? Do you have one bass set for classical maybe? Or?
Yeah, now I do. When I started working on the solo record, I explored using strings that were made for bowing, and it was like, oh, this is what they're talking about. Yeah. It's like the bow grips, the string grips the bow here, and it's also, I'd say, softer and darker, warmer, and so I did explore that. And so one of the Ben's bass I have at home, I set up for that actually. So I use that to kind of practice classical or bow arco stuff. So I mean, I can bow these strings and they sound fine. I mean, actually, the olive sounds really good bowed, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
very warm. But it's to me, like the string issue is really, it's like you wake up and you feel like something else for lunch that you did the other day.
Yeah.
And I like just kind of moving through it and seeing how the strings kind of affect me in a way too, what it brings out in my own playing. Because at this point, hopefully the core of who I am as a bass player is there enough where I can switch strings and maintain that. So it's just different taste every day, and so I do like moving through strings quite often. Yeah,
I think it does present a new kind of sound world, doesn't it? To then be working with, which will get you back on the instrument. And it's been fascinating speaking to you about this, Larry, because I've always followed what you do, and I've always checked out the different strings. And with all my kind of favorite bass players, I'm always kind of looking to see what they're using and thinking about their sound, and and also you mentioned about the Gerold Genssler strings, which you're a fan of as well.
Which I often will put on, and he makes quite a few different versions of his strings, and they're beautifully made, and they stay in tune amazingly well, and they bow very well, considering that they're wrapped gut. So there are so many options now. I was thinking back when I started, it seemed to me, from my perspective, that there were either Tomastics, there were golden spiral gut strings, and I think there were the labellas, these black nylon strings, and that was about it, maybe from what I saw. Now there's dozens and dozens, so it's kind of crazy, and it might be overwhelming, and it's kind of expensive to experiment. But I always tell bass players to experiment, because you're not sure what's going to sound good on your instrument. What sounds good on my bass may sound not so good on your bass.
That's it, because I know that if everyone's thinking, what should I put on my bass? Should I go and buy the spiral chords that you've got on? And as you say, every bass is different, and maybe you're at a different place in your playing. What about some of your recordings that you think you've got a really great sound from, that you're really proud of? Is there anything? I guess, to be fair, with Gleaners is a
that was fun,
sound.
in that way, because it was so alone. I could really, highlight those aspects. And then also I was there for the mix, which typically as a bass player, as a sideman, you're not part of the mix. But like I said, this engineer, James Farber, who I've worked with on dozens and dozens of records, all of Brad's records, I really trust him, and I feel he knows what the bass should sound like. He knows what I sound like over the years. So, all those records with Brad, I think he's captured it really well. This Paul Motion record I told you about, I think this guy could really captured it well too. So, it's not an easy instrument to record. Obviously it's not an easy instrument to amplify either. So, we do the best we can with the way we play. The information comes out clearly, so that they have an easier time getting it to tape.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Larry, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this afternoon at the Barbican Centre. We've had a really terrific afternoon hearing you play and checking out your instrument, and of course talking about double bass strings, one of my favourite things to do. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure meeting you. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you for watching at home. If you want to learn more about what we do, please visit discoverdoublebass.com, and we'll see you in the next video.